So one of the big differences between Python and some other languages you may have seen in the past is how code is indented in Python. So every language has some way of indenting a code block, which, according to Wikipedia, is a lexical structure of source code which is grouped together. So a code block would be the body of a function, the body of a loop, the body of a conditional statement. All of those things are things you've seen before. And with a lot of languages, especially languages with a C-style syntax, you'll use some special token. In the case of C or Java, it's opening and closing braces to say, hey, this is where these statements are grouped together. But in Python, things are slightly different. So in Python, all code blocks must be indented. There's nothing special to indicate the start or end, so you have to use indentation. That means indentation is important. So be consistent with your indentation. Don't mix tabs and spaces, and you also have to use a consistent number of spaces at the start of each indented line in the block. And so if there's a different number of spaces, those are recognized by Python as being separate blocks. And then finally, use 4 spaces to indent code. That's the agreed upon convention for Python. So in C, for example, you can see here's some functions. We have a function here, and you can see we have the opening and closing braces. Here we have a loop, opening and closing braces. And in this case, if there's just one line of code, if the block has one line, you don't need the braces, but I like to always add those. And of course, if we had multiple lines in this particular code block, we would add those inside the braces. Now in Python, so maybe we want to do some stuff with random numbers, then I could do something like x equals random, and I'll get a random number here, and then I can print x. So no indentation because we just have one block. So if I run this, you can see I get a result. Nothing interesting yet. So suppose I want to do a comparison of this random number and see if it's bigger than 5. Okay, so I have my if case, and then I'm going to, if it's bigger than 5, I'll just print that it's big. And you'll notice there's 4 spaces of indentation here. That happened automatically when I used the colon, signifying the end of the statement, and that a code block is following. And you may say, why use 4 spaces? Why not just use a tab? If we look at the style guide for Python code, this is something you should try to follow wherever possible. And if we scroll down a little bit to indentation, use 4 spaces per indentation level. So we're going to take this as authoritative because it is. Is it wrong to use different indentation? In the sense that your code would still compile? No, but something like Pylint is going to complain about it, and your code's not going to be following the conventional indentation. So 4 spaces. Now in this case, let's have a loop here. So we're going to nest a loop inside of a conditional, and we'll say while x is less than or equal to 10. Then we'll say x is equal to x plus 1, and we'll print growing. So if I run this now, we got 10 as a big number, but then 4, you can see we have the loop. That's one example. One other example, though, that's going to be common is if you're writing a function. And for our function, let's just say I want to print whatever this value is. Or how about this? I'll do 2 lines, and then we'll just print the value. And so again, you can see this code block is indented, indicating that everything is in this function. Let's call this function here. And now when I run this, you can see you asked me to print. So here's where it's printing that. And actually, how about this? Instead of saying you asked me to print, let's go print some equal signs and so forth. And this will kind of set it off nicely from the rest of the code. I think that would look better. And you can see it does. So now suppose I do this. I've taken away this indentation. So when I print now, notice where the line is. I was printing this line of equal signs, whatever the value was, a line of equal signs. But now I'm printing this once at the start of the program. And that's because this line is no longer part of the function. I need to indent it so that it is. Now, one other thing I want to point out when it comes to indentation, suppose I'm using Notepad, and let's just say here that I put in a tab. And it looks like the tab is 8 spaces here. But what I want you to notice is that this is a tab character, whereas this is 8 spaces. So if I save this and try to run it, I'm going to get inconsistent use of tabs and spaces because I have tabs, I have spaces. However, if I go back here and change each of these sets of spaces to a tab, tab here, tab here, tab here. Now if I run this after I save it, you can see it does work, even though I have tabs and not spaces. Now, we definitely want this to be consistent with the Python convention, so we're going to change this back to spaces. However, that's just another example of how you need to make sure that you're consistent with whatever it is that you do. So that's a quick discussion of indentation in Python, why it's important, and encouragement to be consistent.